Something was indeed there. Less than a mile behind them, across the moonlight, was another sailing boat, small, painted what looked like black, with a giant sail that billowed black in the night, and a single man at the tiller, a man in black. The Spaniard looked at the Sicilian. "It must just be some local fisherman out for a pleasure cruise alone at night through shark-infested waters." "There's probably a more logical explanation," the Sicilian said. "But since no one in Gilder could know yet what we've done, and no one in Florin could have gotten here so quickly, he is definitely not, however much it may look like it, following us. It is coincidence and nothing more." "He's gaining on us," the Turk said. "That is also inconceivable," the Sicilian said. "Before I stole this boat we're in, I made many inquiries as to what was the fastest ship on all of Florin Channel, and everyone agreed it was this one." "You're right," the Turk agreed, staring back. "He isn't gaining on us. He's just getting closer, that's all." "It's the angle we're looking from and nothing more," said the Sicilian. Buttercup could not take her eyes from the great black sail. Surely the three men she was with frightened her, but somehow, for reasons she could never begin to explain, the man in black frightened her more. "All right, look sharp," the Sicilian said, just a drop of edginess in his voice. The cliffs of insanity were very close now. The Spaniard maneuvered the craft expertly, which was not easy, and the waves were rolling in toward the rocks now, and the spray was blinding. Buttercup shielded her eyes and put her head straight back, staring up into the darkness toward the top, which seemed shrouded and out of reach. Then the humpback bounded forward, and as the ship reached the cliff face, he jumped up, and suddenly there was a rope in his hand. Buttercup stared in silent astonishment. The rope, thick and strong, seemed to travel all the way up the cliffs. As she watched, the Sicilian pulled at the rope again, and it held firm. It was attached to something at the top, a giant rock, a towering tree, something. "Fast now," the Sicilian ordered. "If he is following us, which, of course, is not within the realm of human experience, but if he is, we've got to reach the top and cut the rope off before he can climb up after us." "Climb?" Buttercup said. "I would never be able to." "Hush!" the Sicilian ordered her. "Get ready," he ordered the Spaniard. "Think it," he ordered the Turk. And then everyone got busy. The Spaniard took a rope, tied Buttercup's hands and feet. The Turk raised a great leg and stomped down at the center of the boat, which gave way immediately and began to sink. Then the Turk went to the rope and took it in his hands. "Load me," the Turk said. The Spaniard lifted Buttercup and draped her body around the Turk's shoulders. Then he tied himself to the Turk's waist. Then the Sicilian hopped, clung to the Turk's neck. "All aboard," the Sicilian said. This was before trains, but the expression comes originally from carpenters loading lumber, and this was well after carpenters. With that, the Turk began to climb. It was at least 1,000 feet, and he was carrying the three, but he was not worried. When it came to power, nothing worried him. When it came to reading, he got knots in the middle of his stomach. And when it came to writing, he broke out in a cold sweat. And when addition was mentioned, or worse, long division, he always changed the subject right away. But strength had never been his enemy. He could take the kick of a horse on his chest and not fall backwards. He could take a 100-pound flour sack between his legs and scissor it open without thinking. He had once held an elephant aloft using only the muscles in his back. But his real might lay in his arms. There had never, not in 1,000 years, been arms to match Fezzik's, for that was his name. The arms were not only gargantuan and totally obedient and surprisingly quick, but they were also, and this is why he never worried, tireless. If you gave him an axe and told him to chop down a forest, his legs might give out from having to support so much weight for so long, or the axe might shatter from the punishment of killing so many trees, but Fezzik's arms would be as fresh tomorrow as today. And so, even with the Sicilian on his neck and the princess around his shoulders and the Spaniard at his waist, Fezzik did not feel in the least bit put upon. He was actually quite happy, because it was only when he was requested to use his might that he felt he wasn't a bother to anybody. Up he climbed, arm over arm, 200 feet now above the water, 800 feet now to go. More than any of them, the Sicilian was afraid of heights. All of his nightmares, and they were never far from him when he slept, dealt with falling, so this terrifying ascension was most difficult for him, perched as he was on the neck of the giant. Or should have been difficult, but he would not allow it. From the beginning, when as a child he realized his humped body would never conquer worlds, he relied on his mind. He trained it, fought it, brought it to heel. So now, 300 feet in the night and rising higher, while he should have been trembling, he was not. Instead, he was thinking of the man in black. There was no way anyone could have been quick enough to follow them, and yet from some devil's world that billowing black sail had appeared. How? How? The Sicilian flogged his mind to find an answer, but he found only failure. In wild frustration, he took a deep breath, and in spite of his terrible fears, he looked back down toward the dark water. The man in black was still there, sailing like lightning toward the cliffs. He could not have been more than a quarter mile from them now. "Faster!" the Sicilian commanded. "I'm sorry," the Turk answered meekly. "I thought I was going faster." "Lazy, lazy!" spurred the Sicilian. "I'll never improve," the Turk answered, but his arms began to move faster than before. "I cannot see too well because your feet are locked around my face," he went on. "So could you tell me, please, if we're halfway yet?" "A little over, I should think," said the Spaniard from his position around the giant's waist. "You're doing wonderfully, Fezzik." "Thank you," said the giant. "And he's closing in on the cliffs," added the Spaniard. No one had to ask who he was. 600 feet now. The arms continued to pull over and over. 620 feet. 650. Now faster than ever. 700. "He's left his boat behind," the Spaniard said. "He's jumped onto our rope. He's starting up after us." "I can feel him," Fezzik said. "His body weight on the rope." "He'll never catch up," the Sicilian cried. "Inconceivable!" "You keep using that word," the Spaniard snapped. "I don't think it means what you think it does." "How fast is he at climbing?" Fezzik said. "I'm frightened," was the Spaniard's reply. The Sicilian gathered his courage again and looked down. The man in black seemed almost to be flying. Already he had cut their lead 100 feet, perhaps more. "I thought you were supposed to be so strong," the Sicilian shouted. "I thought you were this great mighty thing, and yet he gains?" "I'm carrying 3 people," Fezzik explained. "He has only himself and—" "Excuses are the refuge of cowards," the Sicilian interrupted. He looked down again. The man in black had gained another 100 feet. He looked up now. The cliff tops were beginning to come into view, perhaps 150 feet more, and they were safe. Tied hand and foot, sick with fear, Buttercup wasn't sure what she wanted to happen, except this much she knew. She didn't want to go through anything like it again. "Fly, Fezzik!" the Sicilian screamed. 100 feet to go! Fezzik flew. He cleared his mind of everything but ropes and arms and fingers, and his arms pulled and his fingers gripped and the rope held taut and— "He's over halfway," the Spaniard said. "Halfway to doom is where he is," the Sicilian said. "We're 50 feet from safety, and once we're there and I untie the rope—" He allowed himself to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha!" 40 feet. Fezzik pulled. 20. 10. It was over. Fezzik had done it. They had reached the top of the cliffs, and the Sicilian jumped off, and then the Turk removed the princess, and as the Spaniard untied himself, he looked back over the cliffs. The man in black was no more than 300 feet away. "It seems a shame," the Turk said, looking down alongside the Spaniard. "Such a climber deserves better than—" He stopped talking then. The Sicilian had untied the rope from its knot around an oak. The rope seemed almost alive. 3, 2, 1. "It seems almost a shame," the Turk said, looking down alongside the Spaniard. "Such a climber deserves better than—" He stopped talking then. The Sicilian had untied the rope from its knots around an oak. The rope seemed almost alive, the greatest of all water serpents, heading at last for home. It whipped across the cliff tops, spiraled into the moonlit channel. The Sicilian was roaring now, and he kept at it until the Spaniard said, "He did it." "Did what?" The humpback came scurrying to the cliff edge. "Release the rope in time. You see?" He pointed down. The man in black was hanging in space, clinging to the sheer rock face, 700 feet above the water. The Sicilian watched, fascinated. "You know," he said, "since I've made a study of death and dying and am a great expert, it might interest you to know that he will be dead long before he hits the water. The fall will do it, not the crash." The man in black dangled helpless in space, clinging to the cliffs with both hands. Oh, how rude we're being, the Sicilian said, then, turning to Buttercup. I'm sure you'd like to watch. He went to her and brought her, still tied hand and foot, so that she could watch the final pathetic struggle of the man in black 300 feet below. Buttercup closed her eyes and turned away. Shouldn't we be going? The Spaniard asked. I thought you were telling us how important time was. It is, the Sicilian nodded. But I just can't miss a death like this. I could stage one of these every week and sell tickets. I could get out of the assassination business entirely. Look at him. Do you think his life is passing before his eyes? That's what the books say. He has very strong arms, Fezzik commented, to hold on so long. He can't hold on much longer, the Sicilian said. He has to fall soon. It was at that moment that the man in black began to climb. And that, folks, literally is what they call a cliffhanger.